Dave, late 70s, early 80s, interesting time in your life. You were well known for a raggy tash and blonde bouffant hairdos. What do you remember of that era?
To be honest with you, my football life spanned from 1976 until, well, even now in terms of still involved. That period of my life was probably the best period of my entire life in terms of, even from a social point, from a footballing point. It was like an incredible period. From 78 to maybe 82 was without doubt the best 4 years of my life.
I suppose most fans will think back to that era and think, yeah, Hodgie was the lad who stood on the terraces, stood in the old gate. Yeah. What possessed you to do that? What was the reason?
I was suspended for the game, West Bromwich Albion. I'd got sent off the week previous against Man City. And at the time...
Was it deserved?
To be honest, I was absolutely torturing them on that particular day. I really was. And Nicky Reid, who played with me in England under 21s, actually we went from there straight to the international game as well, by the way. He wasn't dealing with me at all, and it turned into a bit of a scuffle. So yeah, in a way, I think it was. I think I was the last person to get a red card before they took the red card system away. So I think I was the last person to get that.
Anyway, you were back. Sorry.
Anyway, the bottom
we digress.
Line is, the whole gate came about because of my suspension, and at the time there was two lads in particular, Tommy McGinn and a lad called Spanky, and I knew them really well. Good lads, just ordinary lads from the street. They weren't, from the football world or anything. And I said I would join them in the Holgate, and I think they were a bit, no chance Hodgie wouldn't come, and I did. And I actually was the only person to stand the Holgate end and sing a Sunderland song and not get clipped for it, which I did, just for the fun of it, But it was great. Listen, I'm an ordinary kid. I come from Gateshead. I've been a football fan all my life. I come from the street, to say. So being in there wasn't anything like different to me, but maybe from a footballing side, why would a player go and stand in the terraces? Well, for me, it was just normal practice. But it was where I wanted to be on that particular day, especially when we won. It was fantastic.
You mentioned Sunderland. We'll come on to that in a bit. Yeah. But that era of the borough seemed to peter out after the quarter-final replay at Molineux. Wolves, I remember that. I mean, I nicked off my apprenticeship days at ICI to be there and got caught on TV. But what was happening at that time? Because it seemed to be a real transition from the club, positive as it was, then it faded away.
Literally overnight as well, in theory. I think had we beaten Wolves, we were a top six side in the old, what they called First Division. And I think we were probably the best footballing side in that league, And I think had we beaten Wolves, the club would have gone from strength to strength. But as it happened, the flip side is we got beaten in the replay down there. We went out and the club just, it folded. The atmosphere around the town, around the stadium on match days, it had gone literally overnight. The fans turned on certain players, Big Billy being one of them that they picked on, Craig Johnson disappeared, Spike disappeared, Procky left. So the nucleus of the side just disappeared, and not just the nucleus, but the best players of the side went. And I think Tony Mack, I'm not sure if Tony went prior or after me. Those were the heartbeat of Middlesbrough Football Club, and then the players we brought in, we're never going to replace them, and the club just never. I think that was the beginning of the decline for Middlesbrough as a football club, and thank God Steve Gibson turned up X amount of years later to bring it back,
Talking about leaving, I mean, shortly after you went to Liverpool, so it was a backward step, wasn't it? I mean, it was only 3 Charity Shields, a European Cup, a league title, a couple of League Cups. I mean, there was not much success there at all, was there? But what was it like as this daft lad from Gateshead, then who'd gone to Middlesbrough, and then you're in Liverpool?
And this daft lad from Gateshead actually turned Liverpool down first time because I didn't want to go, and I think they came out with the excuse that I didn't want to leave my pigeons because, I had racing pigeons as well. So that was one of the first things that came out, that Dave Hodgson didn't want to go because he had racing pigeons, which actually wasn't true. But I'm a simple lad. I was happy. What was Liverpool going to bring to me in terms of my happiness that I didn't already have? Of course, you're playing for one of the biggest clubs, but I was never driven by that. I was driven just to want to play football and 2, to be happy. And as long as those went hand in hand, why move? And I was forced out of Ayresome Park, and Harold Shepherdson, God bless him, he drove me down to Liverpool to make sure that I turned up, to be honest with you. So listen, for me, at one point I regretted it, but at the same time, when you look back and say you were part of a club that won what you've just reeled off there, has to say that, you know, you've done something right at some point in your life.
Let's come to the present day, the Borough back in the Premier League. Reactions first to see them back there?
Oh, listen, again, Steve Gibson, and I know the guy, I know the chairman obviously, but I don't know him well at all, okay? When we got beat at Wembley, and when the Borough got beat at Wembley, all I could think about was him. Only because I know about football, I've managed, I know what it's like to be involved in a football club where everything's counting on something. And I thought, oh my God, how they're going to get next season recover from this and get up, you know, because it can have an adverse effect on you. So I thought only of him. And then when they got promoted, I thought of him again. But then, of course, then the town benefits from it because the amount of revenue that's generated with the Premier League coming in, the fans coming to Middlesbrough for the match days and league. So all of that then, you know, is very, very, very important. But my first thought at Wembley was Steve Gibson, and then thereafter Steve Gibson. So, but for the club, it's fantastic. It's where you need to be.
Got to ask you about the game coming, Sunderland.
Yes.
Because you were a Sunderland fan. I
was
don't know if you
Sunderland
still
fan.
are a Sunderland
Well,
fan.
no.
Where do you stand now?
Where do I stand now? It's pretty sad, and the fact is I grew up in Gateshead, supported Sunderland all my life. I supported Sunderland, and John Coddington, who was the coach at the Borough, grabbed me by the throat and threatened to break my jaw if you ever heard me whisper Sunderland Football Club in the ASM ground again. So at that point, I became Borough. Then I ended up loving the Borough, and it meant more to me than anything else. But then you also know that I spent 10 years flogging myself to death on behalf of Darton Football Club. So that took over the Borough and it took over Sunderland. But now I'm away from that. I don't really have one specific love, but the three fixtures I always look for is Borough, Sunderland and Dartford.
And now Borough and Sunderland go head to head.
Yeah.
The Stadium of the Light at the weekend. What do you think? What's your prediction?
Difficult one. One, I'm not too sure if either side have signed enough quality to be able to say comfortably they will remain in the Premier League, okay? Davy Moyes has gone for lads he knows from Man U, but he's gone for lads who don't have a great deal of experience. So at the moment they won't have settled in. The club, he's still in a transition period of trying to get them to buy into his system and his ways, etc. Where the Borough, they're ahead of them on that front. It's a derby game, so things go out the window. If I was a betting man, and I'm not, and I probably could get hung from either side here, I'd probably say the Borough might nick it. That's my gut feeling right now, only because of the stability which is in Borough, as opposed to the transition which now Sunderland are having to go through. So there you go.